Hello and welcome. My name is Taryn, and this is my best friend Tori. And today we are tackling a very hard subject. We're going to be talking about domestic violence. And so, the very first thing we wanted to do is that we wanted to make sure that you know that if you are in a dangerous situation, that you have plenty of resources available to you. And even if you don't think that it might be a domestic violence situation, but you feel unsafe, you should definitely give this place a call. It's called the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and you can find it at thehotline.org. I'm going to put the number down here, and I'm also going to put the number in our description and make sure that you guys know that that's the number that you can call. It's 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233, and you can text BEGIN, BEGIN, to 88788 to reach them. So first of all, I just wanted to put that right out there first thing, that this is a story about Tori rising above domestic violence. Spoiler alert, everything turns out pretty good in the end. So please, know that we're going to be telling the story today, and when we really get into it, we will give you a trigger warning. Tori, good morning. How are you feeling today?
Morning. I'm feeling okay. A little nervous, but good. I feel like this is going to be a very healing episode for me, especially, but also hopefully for others out there too. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
We just want to make sure that everyone knows that they're not alone today. If you are in a serious situation,
Mhm,
you're not alone. You're not the only one. You don't have to do this by
mhm,
yourself. And there are people out there who have been through similar things, and people out there that are available to support you. So just keep that in mind as you hear these stories today, and know that we are here for you. And again, to lean on the resources that we're providing. Um, Tori and I are both wearing purple today. Did you want to talk about that a little bit, Tori, and tell them what that was about?
Um,
Or do you want me to tell?
actually, well, first of all, purple is the color for domestic violence awareness. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And,
Right.
I'm gonna let you tell them the meaning behind the purple.
Sure. Purple symbolizes peace, courage, and survival. And the purpose of wearing purple is to bring survivors together, and it symbolizes solidarity. So, again, you're not the only one. So many people have been through domestic violence situations. I think it's only been in the last couple of decades, really, that we've really been focusing on it and learning more about domestic violence and understanding the impact that it has, especially on women and children. And that's Tori's, whole purpose in wanting to share her story today,
Mhm.
is that we need to talk about it and we need to bring it out. We need to support each other.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Um, yeah, I just wanna say that, it is a hard subject to talk about, and yeah, you're not alone. Um, I know that when you're in the middle of something, a lot of times you don't even realize that you're in a bad situation. You have so much denial. You're trying so hard to hide it from other people that you convince yourself in your own mind that everything's really okay and that it's not as bad as, somebody else's situation. And the thing is first of all, it doesn't have to be as bad as somebody else's situation. If you're uncomfortable, if you are walking on eggshells, if you don't feel safe at any point, that's not okay. And like me in particular, the whole time I was in that marriage, and you're going to hear later about the details of what went on, but the whole time I was going through it, I didn't consider it abuse in my mind. I didn't think I was being abused. I didn't think that this was wrong. I didn't think that my husband was a bad person in any way. I thought, he was stressed sometimes, and he had a little bit of a temper when he was stressed, but there was so much good. going on in our relationship as well. I have good memories of our marriage. And
Mhm.
so those are the things that I focused on when I was in that marriage. And when there were bad days or bad times, you know, I was just I didn't consider it. I didn't consider myself a victim, and it wasn't until years later when I was in therapy after my second marriage, which also wasn't a great marriage, um, that I realized that my first marriage was abusive and that, yes, I was a victim of domestic violence. I was a survivor of domestic violence. Um,
See, that blows my mind a little bit, and I just wanna underline that right
mhm,
now, that you did not feel like you were in a domestic violence situation until you were in therapy for it or for a different relationship years later.
mhm,
Did you realize that, "Oh, that first husband didn't treat me well
mhm.
either,
Yeah,
and
and the
so here
first
I
one
am
was
in this."
even worse than the second one,
Than the second one.
you know, in a lot of
Right.
ways. And there were some ways that the second one was worse than the first one, but it was different. It was a lot different. We're gonna do
Right.
an episode on that one another time too, um, but yeah, I mean, it's very hard, number 1, to accept that this is what's happening in your own mind.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you what, one of the telltale signs is making excuses for him, you know, "Well, why isn't he here at Christmas time?" "Well, he's sick, he's not feeling well." Or, you know, "What is that bruise from?" "Oh, I hit my face on the doorknob." Whatever you come up with. If you're making excuses for him or her, you know, if you're making excuses for them, that's your telltale sign. You are
That's
not in
bad
a good
news.
relationship. You need to get out.
Correct.
And sometimes it's hard and it's scary and you feel alone, and that's one thing too is my husband isolated me as much as he could. He took me away from all of my support systems, and that's one thing.
That was gonna be one of my first story well, my first questions to you was gonna be, everyone's gonna have this on their
Mhm,
mind. "Tori, why didn't you just get out
mhm.
sooner? Why did you," as you tell this story, everybody's gonna say, "Why didn't you leave then? Why didn't you leave then? Why didn't you leave at that point? Why didn't you leave after that happened? Why did you let him back?" All these questions are gonna come up in people's minds. Can you address that, like, right off the bat and say
Yeah,
why you stayed and why you were stuck for so
yeah,
long and how many years this was,
mhm,
and then we'll get into your story a little bit
right.
and talk
Yeah,
about that.
so the reason why it was hard for me to leave is because, first of all, I was young, and honestly, that's not it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how much life experience you have. When you're in love or you think you're in love with someone and you think they're in love with you, and maybe it is actual true love, but when you're in that situation, you think to yourself, "Okay, this is where I belong. I belong with this person." Okay? And like me, I grew up Catholic. So Catholics don't believe in divorce. And I knew a lot of people that had been divorced. My own mom had been divorced, and I knew that there were um legitimate reasons that the church will allow a divorce, but to me, it wasn't an option. Divorce wasn't.
Well, when you're 20 something, also your
Mhm.
mindset is a little bit different.
Yeah,
Your mindset is that you should settle down and get married and have the babies and have a
exactly.
family, and you're trying really hard to
Mhm.
fit into that mold
Right,
at 20
right.
something years old.
And
Okay,
then
so this was your start of your family. This was
right.
you know, your
And
marriage and your
yeah,
baby.
and not only that, having a baby, when you have kids, it's even harder to leave because you don't want
Right.
that child to be without both parents. And you don't
Correct.
and not only that, you know that it's gonna be hard taking care of the child or children on your own. And who knows if
Right.
he's gonna be there for you or them once you leave. The other part
Right.
is, the further along it gets, um, he'll beat you down mentally and make you believe that you can't live without him. He'll like I say, he isolated me and he made me feel and believe that I couldn't leave because I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the car. I didn't have money of my own. I didn't have a real job, and I didn't have real education and the kind of experience that real jobs want you to have, you know?
Right.
And so it made it very difficult. And not only that, a lot of times too, it's really scary because they might hurt you.
Right. Right. So let's get into all of those details now. I think it's a good time to go ahead and start telling about your story. How did you meet him? How did you
Um,
first get to know him, and what was it like in the very beginning?
Actually, real quick before we get into the story, I just want to
Okay.
say I want to tell people about the healing real quick. Just a few things that helped me get out of the situation. Just so you
Abs-
understand that there is hope and that there is, there's stuff that you can do. Um, so for me, it was hard, but the support I got from my family once I did leave him was one of the keys for me to stay away, when I finally
mm,
did. Uh, and I didn't tell a whole lot of people, so it was really just my mom and dad that really helped me, but even bigger than that was my daughter. My daughter was my savior, on so many different occasions. But,
even though she was just a little guy.
exactly, exactly. Um, so focusing on something, and for me, that was my daughter. Focusing on something. Therapy was huge. I highly recommend therapy. It is not a bad thing. I want to, um, I know that there's a certain stigma around therapy, that there's something wrong with you, but it's not like that. We've come a long way in the past couple decades, and therapy is a very good thing. Honestly, I think everybody should be in therapy because we all have stress. We all have, you know, some degree of anxiety, at least from time to time. That it's therapy is a very good thing. Highly recommend that. Um,
What therapy is really good for is to teach you skills.
mhm,
Okay, so everybody thinks therapy is going in and whining about your
mhm,
problems, and it's not like that. It's more like you identify a problem, and then you learn how to cope with that problem,
right.
and you learn how to cope with other people around that
Mhm.
problem. So it's more about learning
Yeah.
skills than it is
It's a
about
tool.
crying about your
It's
problem.
a tool to help
Right,
you get through life a little bit easier. Um,
right.
yeah. The other thing is, when I say finding something to focus on, it's even if you don't have kids, there's so many things. You focus on your job, you focus on your education. If you want to go to school, you focus on, it might be a volunteer situation. You might want to, focus on a garden in the yard, find a hobby, um,
Mm.
whatever it is that you can do that you can focus on and put your energy towards something other than him and other than the relationship that you just got out of or are trying to get out of. Um, you focus on something positive and try to find the positive things around you, even if it's just, oh, I saw a rainbow, or oh, I saw a butterfly, or, I love the smell of rain, just one thing. Um, the other thing is smile. Smile as much as you can, even when you think you can't, just smile because the act of smiling helps you feel better. It brings more positive energy just into your whole being, So even when you feel sad or depressed or angry or anxiety, whatever it is, just smile.
I'm trying. I do feel
See?
better.
Yeah,
It worked.
it
It worked.
it works.
And don't you feel better just looking at me?
Yeah.
You know? I feel better just looking at you with a smile
Exactly.
on
Well,
your
see,
face.
even just a smile, passing by somebody and giving them a smile might make them feel seen. It's a very powerful thing. People don't think about that often. Um, the other big one for me, people always say, just take it a day at a time, just one day at a time. Um, for me, that was way too overwhelming. I couldn't even think about the whole day. You know, you take it 5 minutes at a time, just 5 minutes. you get through that 5 minutes and then you're, "Okay, I can tackle the next 5 minutes." It's so much easier, and it was so much it made me feel better just knowing that I didn't have to worry about the entire day.
Very good advice.
Alright, so here's your trigger warning. We are gonna get into the nitty-gritty here. So, here we go. So you asked me
Here we go.
about how I met him.
Yeah, and tell me about what it was like in the beginning, like,
Yeah,
because I know it doesn't start out bad, right? It starts
right.
out all fairy
Yeah,
tale.
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
let's hear the fairy tale. I wanna
Okay.
know. Tell me all the nitty-gritty details.
Okay, so when we first met, um, it was kind of a funny story. I was at a party and um, one of my friends dared me to go knock on this cute guy's door, right? And I was like, hell yeah, I'll do that. So I went up to his apartment and I knock on the door. He opens it. I was like, hey, is so and so here? And he's like, no, I think you have the wrong apartment. I think she lives down that way. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna borrow, like, a cup of sugar from her. I'm downstairs at my friend's dad's house, and he's like, "Yeah, I got sugar," and so he gave me this sugar, and I was like, "Hey, come down for a beer."
I'm sure he gave you the sugar.
He did.
Uh-huh, he gave you all the sugar.
Uh, but yeah, it was kind of funny the way we met, and then, we would spend hours on the phone after that, we just hit it off like that. And he just was this cute guy and he was sweet to me and he would like cook me dinners and stuff like that and he was a good cook.
I have a
Yeah.
question for you. You spent hours on the phone with this guy in 1990 what? And how much did it cost you
Oh gosh.
to spend hours on the phone with him?
Yeah.
Because that was long distance at the time, even though he only lived, like, 30 minutes
Right.
away.
Yeah. It was long distance. And the other thing is I had roommates. I had like three roommates. So I didn't want to talk phone on the phone at home. So I would go to the payphone down the street at the 7-Eleven. So I'm sitting here on this payphone for like hours at a time, just throwing more quarters in, so I could talk to this cute guy.
Girl, that's
Yeah.
love. You're spending all your laundry quarters on some
Yeah.
guy, okay.
I didn't want to lose that one just because we lived 30 minutes away. But yeah, it was kind of funny. I don't even know how much money I spent in that payphone, but yeah. I probably kept the 7-Eleven open just because they had the payphone there for me. Um,
Ma Bell.
yeah, for real. But yeah, so yeah, in the beginning he would do all kinds of just sweet things here and there, It wasn't constant or anything like that. It wasn't over the top. We would be driving along and he'd pull over and pick some sunflowers and bring them to me, which was super cute. Stuff like that,
Mhm.
you know. And like a month or so into our relationship after we started sleeping together is when I found out I was pregnant. And I didn't know because there was, like, a month between him and the last guy that I slept with, right? And so I was like, "Shit, I'm
Yeah.
pregnant. Is it this guy's or is it his?" I didn't know. And I was completely honest with both of them. I was like, "Look, I'm pregnant. It could be yours or it could be his." There's, like, a month there in between, so it was
Mhm.
close. And so through the pregnancy, he was still there. We were still together for a while and he didn't know how to handle that because he didn't want kids. He never wanted kids. He never wanted a marriage. He never wanted any of that. So when I was pregnant, he kind of didn't really outwardly acknowledge my pregnancy. He didn't talk about it at all. Um but he would do little things that I could tell were it was different, the way he would treat me and act. He didn't want me in the shower by myself, like, when nobody else was home. So, like, he'd be like, "You take your shower before I go to work," you know? "I don't want you in the shower when I'm gone," type thing. "What if you fall?" You know?
Oh, 'cause if you
Mhm.
fell, he wanted to be there to protect you or to help
Right.
you back up again
Yeah.
if you fell down
He
and
actually was worrying about
Mhm.
the baby at the time, making sure I stayed healthy and not, you know? So that, you know, I that part I liked. I didn't like that he wouldn't acknowledge it with words. He wouldn't talk about it, but I could tell he cared, by his actions. Um, and we actually broke up.
Were were you preparing for the baby by this point? Were you guys buying it, buying
I was. So,
cribs
we
and
didn't live together at this point. I was
okay.
still living on my own. Actually, I think I moved in with my mom when I was pregnant. I moved back in with my mom because my roommates sucked, and plus it was, 3 of us living in a two-bedroom house, or 4. There was 4 of us actually living in a two-bedroom house, so it was rough. Um, there's no way I was gonna bring a baby into that house. So I moved in with my mom when I was pregnant, and so I had been buying stuff. I had been, fixing up her nursery and everything at my mom's house, and I would stay at his
Mhm.
house, usually on the weekends, but, if I ever started talking about the pregnancy, he would just kinda change the subject. He might listen to what I say, and then he would just change the subject. But
I was gonna
yeah.
ask about that. I was gonna ask what he did when you brought it up.
Mhm,
Now, I was also gonna ask you, did you ever experience any violence during your pregnancy?
mm-mm,
Because many women do. Many, many, many women, the first sign that they ever get of
mhm.
domestic violence is while they're
Right.
pregnant. And I wondered if he ever did anything to you or said anything to you that was off color
Not at all.
about the
Not at
pregnancy.
all.
Okay.
He just like I say, he
So
just
that
wouldn't talk about the pregnancy, and
he
I
just
could tell
pretended like it didn't exist,
Yeah,
or if you did, then he would say whatever and move on to the next
yeah,
thing.
yeah, he would change the subject as quickly as he could. He would acknowledge kind of what I said, like, he would be like he heard it, but that was about it.
Mhm.
He wouldn't you know
Would linger in the
Right,
conversation.
right, and he would never ever bring anything up about it. Never.
He wouldn't ask you how you feel or how's the baby doing today or
No,
nothing.
no. When I started feeling the baby move, Um, I kinda made him feel it. It wasn't like I forced him, but I was like, "Hey, come feel this baby moving," and I'd put his hand on my belly, and he'd be like, "Oh, that's
Mhm.
so weird," the first time, of course, he's like, "Oh, that's so weird," you know? But then he'd pull away really quick and be like and I knew that a lot of it was because he didn't want kids, and I felt like he was trying not to get too attached because he knew he didn't want kids, and he didn't know how he was gonna react when the baby was born, you know? Especially knowing that
How
it
did
might
he
not be
react?
his. Well, we
How
actually
did he react when the baby
we
was born?
actually broke up before she was born, like a couple months before she was born. We broke up and,
Why did you break up?
um, I think I don't really remember. It wasn't there was nothing violent going on. There was not like fighting or anything like that. Um, I think we both just decided it was best because like I say, he didn't want kids and we lived, 30, 45 minutes away from each other, and I knew that once the baby was born, I she was gonna need all my attention. And so we just
Okay.
kind of agreed to break up. We would still talk on the phone. I never went over again, and the talking on the phone wasn't the same as before. It was just kind of we'd call and, check up on each other, whatever, talk for a couple minutes, and that was it. And it wasn't every day. It was just, here and there. Um, but again, on those phone conversations, he never asked how the baby was. He didn't ask about the pregnancy at all. He'd ask how I was, but it wasn't like, "How's the baby?" or anything like that. And then when the baby was born, I called him the day or maybe the day after she was born just to tell him that she was born, and he's like, "Okay." And that was it. I said, "I just wanna let you know the baby was born." He goes, "Okay." And that was yeah.
Okay. Like, not no congratulations, how was it? How are you? How's the baby? Like, no normal
Nope.
questions, just this real flat affect.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was just okay. I think he might have said, "Are you okay?" or something like that, you know? Um, but it wasn't much of anything at all, and that was literally the end of the conversation, you know?
Okay.
Thought you were gonna say something more. But yeah.
No, I would have been incredibly disappointed
Oh, I was.
in that
It was
reaction.
very
You would have expected him
Mhm.
to say something like, "Oh, how's the baby?" Or, like, care something about a child that is
Anything.
potentially his
Yeah.
child, okay? So, How did you feel? How did you feel at that
It
point? So because you guys were broken up
right.
and he said, "Oh," and then what
So
did you do after that?
it was it was extremely disappointing and it was extremely hurtful. I cried when I got off the phone with him because I expected him to say at least, at the very least, say, "How is she?" You know, "Is the
Right.
baby healthy?"
Is it a boy or a
Yeah.
girl?
Well, we
Did he
knew it was a
care?
girl already.
Oh, you
Yeah, so
okay.
we already knew it was a girl, and but I expected him to say at least something, other than
Right.
"Okay." You know? It was just so, and it was hurtful.
Such a
I
letdown.
was yeah, it was a big
Yeah.
letdown. I was heartbroken. Not for
So how did he come back into your life at that point? Because I would have been like, "All right, well, you're not
Yeah.
interested,
Well,
moving
and I
on. I'll
did. I
go."
didn't call him again after that. I did not. I was just like, "Fine, fuck off." You know? I didn't wanna I didn't wanna deal it was too hurtful for me. So I did not call him
Yeah,
again, and he didn't call me either, which was even more hurtful, but
for how long?
about 4 months, when she was about 4
Okay,
months
so the
old.
baby's 4 months
Mhm.
old.
Maybe 3 or 4 months. Um, he wrote me a letter. He wrote me a letter, and, in his letter, he talked about how much he missed me and how he had been thinking about the baby and how is she. He finally asked how she was. And he said he wanted to meet her. Yeah, and all this stuff. And he's like, can I please meet the baby? Will you just come and talk to me and, we can talk things out. And I just really want to meet the baby. And I was like, okay, yeah, we can do that. So,
Which is all you wanted to hear in the world.
exactly. Exactly.
So this is like a huge hit of dopamine, a
Mhm.
huge hit of like, thank God this man is finally coming around
Yeah, yeah,
to be the man I hoped he would
yeah,
be.
and the man I thought he was. Yep.
And so here he
Mhm.
is. Did he come to see the baby?
I actually went to him because, like I say, I was living at my parents' house, and I didn't even tell my parents I was going to see him. I actually told them I was going to see a different friend, and I did have a different friend in the same, complex because I had met this other lady that lived next door to him. Her name was Kelly, and,
Uh-huh.
so that's who I told my parents I was going to see. I didn't want them to know, um, that it was him that I was seeing, so I went to him. Well,
Why did you lie to your parents and tell them that you were going to see another friend? Why did you not want them to know you were going to see
mostly because I was worried
your
about what they would
soon-to-be husband?
say or what they would think because my parents growing up, they were very strict and, they also very protective, and they didn't want after we broke up, they didn't want him around. They didn't
They didn't want him involved in the baby's
no.
life.
They didn't want him around, they didn't trust him, they didn't want him to hurt me or the baby, and
Why
so
did they think he would hurt you?
just because he left when I was pregnant, because we broke up, and
Uh,
they didn't I didn't talk to my parents a lot about relationships, you know? To this day, I haven't really talked a lot about it, and, it was just as little as possible, really, and I always just told them that I was happy whether I was or not, I didn't share a lot of details with them, so
well, I remember you telling me one time that your mom told you not to burden people with your
yeah, that's
problems.
how I grew up.
And so you've always carried
Mhm,
around this feeling that your problems were not anybody else's
mhm,
concern, nor were they anybody else's business,
exactly.
nor were they anything
Mhm,
that you would put on anybody else. Like, it would be a
right,
burden if you actually said what your
mhm.
problem is.
Yeah, that's how I
That
grew up.
breaks my heart. And if you're
Mhm,
one of those people out there that is like that, please know that that's not
right.
normal. It's not normal to try to carry around your burdens all by yourself without having to share with other people. We need other people to
Yeah,
lean on,
yeah, you are worth it. You and
and you're not
people
alone.
want to know how they can help you if you need help. Um,
Right, I would have wanted to
Yeah,
know as your best friend,
right.
as your friend for many, many, many
Yeah.
years. At that point in our lives, we were busy doing our own things, and
Mhm.
so I knew you had the kid, and I didn't have a kid yet, and I was still, doing my not no kid thing, and you were doing your kid thing,
Mhm.
and we were just kinda on different planes, and you we both slowed down, calling each other because
Right.
we were focused on our
Right,
relationships,
yeah.
and so and you had anyway, so we just hadn't talked very
Yeah.
much, and I think had I known that you were going through anything like this, I could have supported you through it. I could have helped you. I could have given you a place to run away to, like, there's so many things I could have done
You would
had
have,
I
and I
known,
know
but
you
I
would
didn't
have.
know, and you were hiding things from me
Yeah, I
too.
was hiding everything from everybody because that's how I grew up.
Right.
There were things that happened in our house when I was growing up that my mom just didn't wanna share with other people, and she always told me, "We're not gonna burden somebody else with our problems, don't tell anybody anything, you don't have to talk about this to grandma or to auntie or anybody, because it's not their business and it's not their problem, it's ours, and we will deal with it at home." So that's how I grew up, and that in my mind, that's how the world worked, you know? And
It's
for
so
me
unhealthy and sad.
yeah, and for me, that included my parents because that's how my mom didn't share things with her mom, so why would I share things with my mom, you know? And she always told me I could talk to her about anything, but also don't burden other people with your problems, so in my mind, like I say, why would I burden my mom with my problems? Why would I burden my best friend with my problems? I shouldn't do that, you know? That's how I grew up. Um,
Well, thank you for stepping out of that and for being brave and for sharing the story
mhm,
today, because hopefully you'll encourage someone else to speak out
mhm,
if they're in a similar
right,
situation. Your problems are not a burden to everyone
mhm,
else,
and I know
you
that
know,
now. It's
um,
taken me years and years and years to figure that out,
of
and
therapy.
therapy, lots of therapy. And it's still to this day, it's still hard for me sometimes, sometimes I'll be going through something and I just out of instinct and I guess habit, I just don't say things to people. It's not like I go through my mind and be like, "Oh, I can't tell this person." It's just that I just don't do it because that's how I grew up and that's how I've lived most of my life, So it's kind of habit to just move along and keep it to myself, and it is hard for me to ask for help. It's very hard, and even in the last couple years I've learned how to do that more um because of my cancer. My cancer is what put a hard stop to me not asking for help.
Not reaching out
Mhm,
for help,
mhm.
right? I'm so glad that you were able to eventually learn that
Yeah,
lesson. Um, so here you are sneaking out of the house with your 3, 4-month-old baby to go visit
mhm.
him and let him meet the baby, and how did that go?
He actually he thought she was the coolest thing on earth. And he even
She
told me
was.
she was, she still is.
She's your little peanut
She
baby.
is, she's my peanut little
I
baby. Yeah, she he thought she was really cool, and that's what he told me. He said, "Oh, she's a really cool baby. That's the coolest baby."
those were his
Yeah,
words, really cool.
yeah, really cool. He always called her cool. He's like, "She's so cool. That's such a cool baby." You know? And
Aw.
as she grew up, she was always his cool baby. You know? Um, but yeah, he I think he fell in love with her. Love at first sight, you know? And like I say, he knew that there was a possibility that she wasn't his, but at that point, she was his, you know?
Right.
And we took it kinda slow in the beginning, just talking over the phone mostly and visiting once in a while, but no overnights. I would go visit him during the day, if he had a day off, and me and the baby would hang out with him. He couldn't wait to invite his mom and sister over to meet the baby. And of course, they fell in love right away too, because she's the coolest baby ever. And it's so funny because I had never in my
Here she was, your cool
coolest baby
baby.
ever.
So then, when did you first have a sign of trouble? Or I guess when did you, because you move in with him at some point,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it was around her first
So
birthday that we moved in together. And
okay, so months
yeah,
passed, things are going
yeah,
well, you guys are really getting along
mhm,
swimmingly, and then you move in with
mhm,
him toward the end of the year.
yeah. At first, it was really good. We moved into a house together. It was a row house in Denver, um, and it was nice. It was good. We enjoyed living together. We got along. We did what we needed to do. I had a car. I had a 1980, 82 or 84. I don't know. I think it was 1982 Chrysler New Yorker. So it was this big boat of a car.
Uniboat
Yeah.
car.
And and so at first, I had my car and we lived in this cool little row house in Denver. His granny owned a bar that was literally right behind our house. And she lived above it, which was kind of cool to have her there. She was the coolest old lady I've ever known. and and so, yeah, everything was good. We would go to concerts. We had so much fun. We would go to concerts all the time. And, we'd go to Elitch's, which was right across the highway from us. And, there was so much that we would do all the time. It was really nice. So
How long did this good period last?
literally the first 2 years of our relationship, and that includes, from the very beginning, first 2 years of our relationship was bliss. You know, it was I was in love, he was in love. It was just we had so much fun together. We would laugh constantly. It was, even if it was just a day that we spent at home doing literally nothing, we had a good time together. The baby playing was just amazing. I just remember being in our room listening to or in our apartment listening to music and dancing and the kid dancing, and we were all just singing and dancing together. Like my little 1.5-year-old daughter would be singing Rancid songs. Ra- Rancid was her favorite at 2 years old.
Oh my
I
goodness.
know, right?
That's fun.
She even still has. We had gone to a Rancid concert and we got this little tiny t-shirt, and she still has that t-shirt. It's like this big.
Rancid and Paul McCartney.
Yeah, exactly.
What a mix.
Yeah.
So so when was the first sign of trouble?
So, honestly, the first sign, and I didn't see this at the time, but looking back, the first sign was when my car broke down. It didn't break down, it just had like two flat tires at the same time. And he refused to fix it. He just didn't want to fix it. And he just kept making excuses. I kept asking him, can you please fix my tires? I can't do it right now. Maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe on the weekend. It was always an excuse of some sort that he just wouldn't do it. He just kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And it got to the point where I just stopped asking, you know? And that was part of him isolating me. That was the very first start of him isolating me. But like I say, I didn't see that at the
Why do
time.
you think he wanted to isolate you?
What?
Why do you think he wanted to isolate
It's
you?
a control thing. It's a control thing. Um, and it was when they start to isolate you, it's because they want to take you away from your support system. They want you right where they want you so that they can control you and have you they make it, like I said in the beginning, they make it so that you feel like you can't leave. Um they, and that's
So at this point, your car's not working. How did you get around? Were you able to leave and go do the things you needed to
I
do? And
walked. I mean, I couldn't go to the grocery store because it was. Well, actually, I take that back. I did go to the grocery store. So I would have my daughter in her stroller and I would walk to the grocery store. It wasn't that far away, and get whatever I needed for that day or that week or whatever. Um, Her and I walked everywhere. We walked all sorts of places. We'd walk into downtown Denver. We live right outside of downtown Denver, like right across the highway. So we would walk into downtown and just hang out or do stuff. The pavilions that are down there, the pavilions. Um,
Mhm.
at first it wasn't there. and we literally watched them build the pavilions.
Oh, that's kinda
Yeah,
groovy.
it was.
So what about, uh, um, how did you get money? Because you weren't working at this
Yeah,
time,
I wasn't working, I
right?
was a stay-at-home mom. He would give me money to go do things during the day, like, if I wanted to take Emily downtown, he would give me 20 bucks or whatever, so we could do stuff. I
But expect you to ride the bus. You couldn't drive your
Right.
car.
No, we walked into downtown. We always walked to downtown. And, or like I say, the grocery store. If I if I needed to go to the grocery store, he'd give me grocery money. And I did have to ride the bus. Like we had, we would take. She would stay at my mom's house every other weekend, and at this point, I had to ride the bus. I had to take her and her bag and her car seat and her stroller on the bus all by myself, take her to Longmont, and then ride the bus back home by myself. And then at the end of the weekend, my parents would bring her home. Um, but yeah, I couldn't drive my car, so, here I was, I could walk to places, but I didn't know anybody in Denver besides his family, you know? None of my friends lived out there.
That's surprising to me too
Mhm,
because you make friends everywhere you
mhm.
go, and you weren't making friends in
Not at
Denver.
all. Closest
Because
thing.
why? Because he wouldn't let people come over to the house,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, so
What happened?
oh,
Oh, r
yeah,
tell us that story about
yeah,
the
so and this was actually the first sign that I actually did notice, um, but again, denial hit, so you do what you gotta do, but so what happened was, I would talk to my friends on the phone whenever I had a chance, and of course, everybody's working or doing their own thing in their life, so it wasn't like I.
it's long
Yeah, and
distance
it's
too,
long
you had to
distance,
call it a payphone.
that costs a lot of money at the time. So, there was this one friend, Kelly, that I wanted her to come. It wasn't the same Kelly from his apartment, it was a different one. Um, but I would talk to her and she wanted to come and visit and everything and see the baby and all this stuff, and so finally one day I was like, "Yeah, come on over." So she comes over and we're just sitting in the living room talking and she's, in awe of the baby and all this stuff, and, um, once in a while he'd come home for lunch. So this particular day he came home and he walked in the house, and when he walked in the house and saw her, he, like, made a beeline for the kitchen. He didn't say a word to anybody, he just walked in and went straight to the kitchen in the back of the house. And I was like, "Well, excuse me while I go just make sure things are cool." She's like, "Okay." So I walk into the kitchen and I was like, "What? Are you okay? What's going on?" And he says, "Who the fuck is that?" And I was like, That's my friend Kelly. Why is she here? Why the fuck is she in my house?" And I was like,
My
"Yeah."
house? Hold on, hold on. Isn't this your combined
Mhm,
house?
mhm,
Okay, so he's using the term "my
mhm,
house."
mhm. "Why the
Okay,
fuck is she in my
okay.
house?" And I was like, She's my friend. She came to visit and see me and the baby. Like, what's the problem?" And he left. He left. Went back to work. He's like, "I gotta go." And he left. He just walked straight out the same way he walked in. Didn't say a word to her, didn't say, whatever. Didn't even acknowledge the baby. Didn't say hi to the baby, bye to the baby, nothing. Which was very unusual. Um, so I was like, "Man, that was weird." I was like, he must be having a hard day or something." I just kind of blew it off as best I could. And he came home that night and he was livid. He was pissed off. And he started in on me the minute he got home. He says, "Don't you ever, ever fucking give my fucking address to anybody again. Ever." And I was like, "What? What?" I said, "This is my address too." I said, "What are you talking about? This is my house too, my home. And these are my friends. I have every right to give out my address. No, you don't ever give my address out." And he went to the kitchen and he ripped the phone out of the wall, like ripped it out and
The
the
phone?
phone. And he smashed
Like,
it to the
tore
ground. Yep,
the cables and everything out so that there was no way you could plug it back
yep.
in again? Like, actually
Ripped it off the fucking wall, violently ripped it off the wall and smashed it onto the ground. So now
oh my
everything was
god.
broken. There was no.
You have no way
So that left me no way of communicating with anybody. I could no longer call my friends, and he told me, he's like, "We're never getting another phone again." What the f
Alright, so how old's the baby at this point?
She was about a year old. Yeah. A
About
little
a
over
year
a year
old.
old.
Okay, so things are starting to feel kinda iffy at this point. You don't have the phone. How did you get a hold of your mom at all?
So, there was, like, right across so we lived right at the end of the or at the beginning of the bridge that crosses I-25 and goes into
Mhm.
downtown, right? So we lived here, and on the other side of the bridge, there was a an armadillo restaurant, and in their entryway, there was a payphone. So I would use the payphone to call my mom, and again, long distance, lots of quarters needed for that call, and usually it was a pretty short call because I didn't always have a lot of quarters. Um,
Right.
and sometimes he was sure of that.
Because he's supplying the quarters that you have to have
Mhm,
to buy the phone
mhm,
calls.
and yeah. And, at one point, my mom actually got me a pager so that she could page me and I can go call her. And she told him that he needed to let me call her when she paged me. Um, so, there was that. But yeah, I mean, that was another way for him to isolate me, and I did lose a lot of friends that way, you know? Um, and that was his goal, was to make sure I didn't have a support system. That's what they do. They
So I went to see you was that after that visit?
Yeah.
But you had permission to let me
Mhm.
come,
I had
I guess.
so
I didn't
after that, I had 2 visits from friends. One was you and one was Karen. Both times, I had to get permission first.
and I don't remember him really interacting with me. I met
Mhm.
him, but he was very, kinda off on his own, doing his own
Yeah.
thing. The other thing I noticed when I was
Mhm.
there was that there were no feminine
Right.
touches in the apartment or in the house. There was, like, fish on the
Yep,
walls, stuff like that,
yep. It was all him.
and
It was all him.
there was no you there. There was no purple, there was
Mhm.
no,
No friendly pictures on the
it
walls, no nothing.
no spider
No
webs.
no skulls
I mean, like,
anywhere.
no skulls.
He didn't have my little
That's what I'm
bunny.
saying, like, we're into Halloween stuff. There's no Halloween stuff. I noticed that as your friend, like,
Mhm.
where's Tori in all
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, I
Okay,
wasn't
so now we set the scene,
Mhm.
and now he has cut you off of everything. You have no way to call anybody. You have no way to do anything here. What happens next? Because I know that this story gets even more intense
Oh,
after
yeah.
this.
Oh, yeah.
So you're okay.
So
So what happens after
so
this?
then well, so after the phone incident, arguments started happening more and more often, and they started getting more and more intense. And I would do everything I could to hide that from my daughter. I would, because I did not want her to have to witness that. And so I would put
Right.
her in her room, I would turn on music or whatever, I turned cartoons on for her. I did whatever I could to keep her away from hearing our arguments, and I'm sure she did. I'm sure she heard and felt a lot more than we realized at the time. I know she
Kids
did.
always do.
Yeah,
They're little sponges. They pick up everything.
exactly. Even when you think they're not listening, they're soaking every little bit of it in. They feel your energy
Right.
and they soak it all in. And we don't always realize that, especially when you're in that kind of a situation. But yeah, so the arguments got more and more, they got more intense. And there was a one day when it got so intense that I just felt like I needed to get the fuck out of the house. I just needed to leave. So here I am packing a diaper bag for Emily, and I didn't know where I was going to go or what I was going to do, but I just need to get out of the house. So I packed a diaper bag for Emily. I grabbed a couple of things for me. Um, I got her. I had her in one arm with the diaper bag on my shoulder, her in one arm, and I got her car seat in my other arm. Right. And the whole time he's still screaming at me, and I'm just trying my best just to kind of block it out and not scream back because I know, the more I scream at him, the more he screams at me. And I just was focusing on getting the fuck out of the house.
Mhm.
And I walk out the front door, and still he's like following behind me, screaming at me. And so we had these concrete steps in front of our house. There was I think like 6 or 8 steps, concrete down to the sidewalk. And I get to the top of the step, and I go to step down that first step, and he punches me in the back of the head so hard that, first of all, I thought I was gonna pass out because he hit me so hard. Second of all,
Wait, you have the baby in your arms.
exactly, and I went flying down those stairs. I could not
Oh,
stay on my
no.
feet, and it was like I dropped the car seat, and I did everything I could to make sure that baby did not hit the ground. Everything I could.
Right.
That was all I could think in my mind. I was like, "I can't let her hit the ground." You know, I flipped over, I did whatever I could so that it was me that took the impact, not her.
Were you hurt?
Yeah, yeah. I was all scraped up.
What happened? How were you
I was
hurt?
scraped up. I hit my head, on the concrete, but thank God she did not hit the concrete. I was able
What did he do?
He stood at the top of
Oh,
the
thank God.
stairs and just watched. He stood at the top of he did not take one step down, he didn't say a word, he just stood up there. Actually, no, I think he did say, I think he was still screaming at me for a minute at least while I was flying down the stairs and hit the ground. He didn't run down and be like, "Oh, are you okay?" Nothing, nothing. He just stood there watching me. And, of course, I'm, like, bawling at this point. I think I was already crying anyway, but at this point, I was bawling because now I'm hurt, and I don't know if the baby's hurt. I knew she didn't hit the ground, but I didn't know if, she was shaken too hard or if she, her head got thrown back or anything. I didn't know. And, of course,
Right.
she started crying too because that's a scary thing, here she is, like, 1.5 years old or whatever it was, and, so I scrambled to get up as fast as I could and pick up her car seat, and everything else, and, I went running, and I ran to his granny's house behind our house, and I, ran up the stairs, and I'm pounding on the door, and I'm bawling my eyes out, and the baby's crying, and, she comes to the door, and she's like, "Oh my god, what happened? Come in, come in." So I go in, and I told her everything, all of it. I told her everything, and she was livid at him. She was so pissed off at him, and she was like, "I'm gonna fucking kill him," you know? And, I was like, "I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do." I'm sitting there crying and bawling. I could not gather myself together, I just couldn't. And so she called her daughter, not his mom, but his aunt. She called his aunt Karen, and, Granny told Karen all about what had just happened, and so she rushed over, and she picked up me and the baby and took us home to her house. And, she even went back to my house and got clothes for me and whatever necessities she could. And she told him to stay
Wow.
away from her house, to stay away from me, that he couldn't call me, nothing. And she kept me at her house for a few days, and she gave me the support that I needed. And she told me that he was wrong for doing that and that this wasn't okay and that I didn't need to go back, that I could stay with her as long as I needed, that she would take me to my mom's if that was what I wanted. She just didn't want me to go back to him.
So you did the right thing running to Granny.
Mhm. Yeah.
You did the right thing doing that, and you did the right thing telling Karen about it, and then Karen was able to step in and talk to him
Mhm.
and be a buffer between the 2 of you and get you into a safe place. Okay, so how on earth did you wind up going back to him after that happened? After he kicked you down the
Mhm.
stairs? How did you wind up going back again?
So when I was staying at Karen's house, at first she wouldn't let him talk to me. He would call and try. He would call over and over again, and she just wouldn't let him talk to me. And after a few days, we got on the phone and he was apologizing upside down and inside out. "I'm so sorry. I love you. I love Emily. And I feel so terrible. And I've been crying because I can't handle this." And he told me that he talked to his boss. He talked to his boss about it, and his boss was pissed at him. And because I guess he told him everything. And his boss told him that he needed to get help. He said, "You need to get counseling for yourself. You need to get family counseling. If you expect her to come back to you, you have to get family counseling." And he told him that if this ever happened again, number one, he was going to fire him and he was going to call the police. and he told him, give her my number and make sure she knows that she's if anything like this ever happens again, she is to call me, and I'm going to take care of it. And he agreed to that. And so he told me all of this, and he promised that he would get into counseling if I come back to him. If I bring the baby and move back in with him, he'll do better.
Did he ever get into counseling?
Not at that point. I moved back in with him,
Okay.
and the first couple of days were fine. They were actually really good. Um, he said, "Well, I'm gonna make it up to you," you know? And, and then a couple of days in, I was like, "Well, when are we gonna start this counseling?" And he blew up at me. And he said, "Fuck that. I'm not doing any counseling ever." He's like, "Don't ever mention that to me again." And I was like, you promised that if I moved back, you would do this. Fuck you. Fuck that. Fuck everything. I'm not doing it."
So there's this real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing happening where he's like a good guy, and then the minute he's got you in his grip,
Yeah.
he switches off to being this monster. Do you think is this alcohol or drug induced?
I mean,
Like what
he was an
was
alcoholic. Um, but he was meaner sober than he was drunk. When he was drunk, he was kind of a fun guy. He didn't get mean. But when he was sober, he was mean and he had a temper. And, there were times when he would, have a temper tantrum or whatever when he was drunk too, but it wasn't as bad as when he was sober. Um, which is kind of
hmm.
the opposite of a lot of people. Uh, so I'm not really sure where that came from, if it was the alcohol or not, or maybe, withdrawals from alcohol. I don't know. But but yeah, and I threatened to call his boss just to tell him that he needed to figure out a way to get him into counseling, and that just made him blow up even more. "Don't you ever call my boss. How dare you threaten me with that?" and blah 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 blah. And this is after he
But
gave
I thought
me
I remembered
yeah, this is after he had given me the boss's number and told me to call him if I needed to,
right.
you know? And now all of a sudden I'm not allowed to call his boss, and I'm not ever allowed to threaten him with that or anything else again.
In all honesty,
Mhm.
his boss was the last guy in the world that needed to be involved in the
Yeah,
situation.
and I'm not
In
sure
all
why he
honesty.
chose his
But
boss to talk to. I really don't know why.
well, because men work together,
Yeah.
and they build those vasopressin bonds
Mhm.
where they solve problems together, and so he trusted his boss to help him solve this problem.
Honestly,
That's
and
why.
this just now literally just now occurred to me. I think another reason why he chose his boss to talk to is because his boss is somebody that he could keep from me.
Oh,
Because he had his brother was always at our house, like, literally every weekend, his brother spent the weekend at our house jamming out in the basement because they played drums and guitars and sang, and, so they would have jam sessions every weekend, and, um, and he had a cousin that he went fishing with a lot too that he was really close with, and, him we would go to his house and with him and his wife and have dinner or whatever, and, he was really close to these
but
people.
why did he give you the phone number to the boss and tell you to contact the
He
boss
was trying to convince me to come home.
that he's
Yeah.
trying?
That was his way
Okay.
to lure me back into the house. But then, as soon as he got it was promises. Even before this, I always said, "Promises made are promises broken." And this is the truest form of that. He made all the
So you moved in with him, you still have no phone, you still have no car.
Mhm,
You're still relying on him for his quarters and his bus
mhm,
money and his phone money,
mhm.
and he's still abusive.
Yeah.
So what happened after this? What happened after was there another incident that occurred, or
So,
how did you get out? When did you get out?
oh, it was a little while later. It wasn't until, like, a year and a half later. There was a lot that went on in that year and a half. Um, one of the major things that happened, so he abused me in every way possible. He abused me emotionally, psychologically, mentally, all of that stuff, obviously physically and sexually too. He was self-proclaimed sex addict, and he, he started being very, very rough and very, insistent. He would tell me that because I was his wife, it was my duty to let him do whatever he wanted. I was there to please him. And so he would take it at any moment and any daytime, nighttime, whatever he wanted, whenever the mood hit him, there he was. And I just had to deal with it. If I didn't want to, if I wasn't in the mood, if I was, hurting in any way, he didn't care. It wasn't his problem. He wanted what he wanted and he was going to take it. And he did. And there were times when I would just be laying there crying and bawling and begging him to please stop. Please stop. You're hurting me. You're hurting me. He would make me bleed. And he didn't care. None of it stopped him. It was, it was my duty. And that was really, really rough on me. Really, afterwards I would go in the bathroom and sit and cry and cry and cry and clean myself up and cry, and I would come back and I would lay down and I would still be crying and he would do it again. He would do it again. It was multiple times a day, every single day. Um,
Why is he not in jail?
I never called the cops.
Why
I
is he not
never called
in
the cops
jail?
on him.
This is a this is a
Yeah.
rapist.
And here's the thing too, at that time, marital rape was not really a thing. People didn't believe in that. It was, "You were married, this is your husband, that's not rape," you know? That's what the mindset of the majority of people was, and, um, I think it was, people were starting to make, that term was starting to be a thing, but it was not widely accepted at all. And so in my mind, it wasn't that's not what it was. I never thought of it as that.
Mhm.
And, and I knew that if I, tried to complain to somebody about it, it wasn't gonna be a thing, they were gonna be like, "You're married. What are you talking about? That's just what happens?" So again, I didn't tell anybody about it. I that was just my it was just my life. That was just how it was. And, within all of this happening, he would always tell me, he beat into my head that I better not get pregnant. I better not get pregnant, and if I got pregnant, he was gonna make sure it didn't last. He would beat the fuck out of me until that baby was gone. He didn't care if he had to
He said
he said
that? He said he would beat you until the baby was
he said
dead?
he would kick my stomach and beat the fuck out of my stomach until the baby was dead.
Oh my god, Tori.
Mhm.
So why didn't you leave then?
I didn't feel like I could. I didn't feel like I
You were
could.
so
I I had no car, I had no resources, I had no line of support whatsoever. Where am I gonna go? How am I gonna go? You know? How am I gonna take care of my baby by myself? I have no job. I don't have a real job. Let me
oh, that's right, you were starting to work for Granny, right? You were working in the little bar that Granny owned. Is that how you were making the money?
I was working for Granny. It was like every day of the week almost. But it was for just a couple hours to clean the bar before they opened. And it wasn't a lot of money that I was making. It was under the table. Um, but that money had to go towards bills, and that money had to go towards groceries. So I didn't get to keep that money, and then I started working at the hotel too. I worked at a hotel downtown, I was a housekeeper. It was a full-time job, but again, that money my money had to buy all the groceries. I had to pay the utilities, and whatever money was left, a lot of times I had to give it to him for, like, rent. I got to keep a little tiny bit just to, put gas in the car. We only had 1 car, so I have to drop him off at work in the morning, go to work, pick him up after I got off work, take the baby to daycare in between all of this and pick her up and all that stuff. So I didn't have money. I didn't have any resources. I couldn't leave. I didn't know how to leave. Um, And that was
What was the break? How did you get out? When did you have enough? When was it like, "This is it. This is what I have to do. I have to get out of here." What was the breaking point?
well, that wasn't even my choice. So, what happened was, like I said before, he knew that there was a possibility that she wasn't his. And when she was born, I didn't put anybody's name on the birth certificate because I didn't know which one to put. And so,
Mhm.
she was about 3 years old, and he needed to put her on his insurance. But the insurance company would not accept her because his name wasn't on the birth certificate. And they told him, "You have to have a paternity test and get your name on the birth certificate in order to put her on." So we had to do a paternity test. And when it came back negative that he wasn't her father, he flipped the fuck out. Flipped out. Um, and he threw me out at that point. Emily and I moved in with my parents. And at the time when this happened, he would not talk to me or Emily. And Emily was a daddy's girl. She was, yeah,
Just a
yeah.
second. Um, I wanted you to if you wanted to talk about the pregnancy too. Do you wanna go
Yes,
back to that?
yes, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
I
Yeah.
wanna kinda time out. We'll go back to this again and cover
Right,
this
right,
part
yeah.
again, but I wanted to go back to
Yeah,
how, you know, why was he saying, "If you get pregnant again, what would happen?" What did
right,
he
right.
say? He would kick you until the baby
Mhm,
died,
mhm.
and then did you ever get pregnant
I
after that?
did, yes. I was on birth control. I got pregnant anyway, and, so I didn't tell him at first because I was terrified of what his reaction was gonna be. Terrified. And I did not want him to kill my baby, you know? I didn't.
Didn't wanna be kicked in the stomach until the baby dies? Yeah, I wouldn't want that
Yeah,
either.
and I was terrified. I was like, "He's gonna do this. He's gonna do this." I was convinced that that's what he was gonna do. That was gonna be his initial reaction, and so I was terrified. I didn't wanna tell him, and I waited and waited and waited, and, I was so stressed. I was so there was so much stress. I did not know what to do. I had gone to Planned Parenthood to get my checkup and to get my, prenatal pills, and I didn't even know what to say to them. I also my initial visit them to them was to confirm that, yes, I was pregnant. Um, and, about just a little over 3 months into the pregnancy, um, I lost that baby, and at that point, I had to tell him. He had to take me to the doctor. Um And it was so traumatic. He actually, when I was telling him I needed to go to the doctor and this is why, he acted supportive. He took me to the doctor and he acted caring. He walked me in holding me, and I had to go through having a DNC, which was
Oh, no.
horrific.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrific. Um and it was painful, and physically and emotionally, and I was crying through the whole thing, and at the end of it, I wouldn't stop bleeding. I was hemorrhaging, and, and it was scary, and at one point, I felt like I was leaving. I felt like I was dying because I was losing so much blood, and I just felt everything draining from me, and I thought I was gonna
Oh,
die, and I actually hoped I would for a minute, and then I was like, "No, I can't because I have Emily. I can't leave my daughter." And, and it was so horrifying, such a horrifying, tragic, experience. And when we went home, we left the doctor's office and he was still kinda, he carried me out and to the car, and I mean, not the doctor's office, but you know what I mean? Um,
yeah,
and
clinic, whatever.
we get home when we got home, he completely flipped to the other side again. He was so mean to me. He said the most hurtful things to me. and he swore up and down it wasn't even his anyway because I had to have been going and, uh, um, cheating on him with somebody else, and, did I even really take those, birth control pills and all this stuff, and it was just he was so mean to me, and all I needed was to be held, and I couldn't stop crying. I could not stop crying the whole time.
So I had a miscarriage one time too, and the worst I've ever felt emotionally in my entire life was as I was coming down off of all of those
Mm,
hormones that you get. The pregnancy hormones are incredibly powerful, and when it's cut off all of a sudden, your brain just goes, "Wah!" And you absolutely need a ton of support in that moment.
Okay, so this is a really heavy subject, and I think we're just going to take a break. We're going to call this part one, and we will come back uh, later on or tomorrow and finish out the episode, and that'll be a part two. So, thank you all for listening, and happy travels, everyone.
Happy travels indeed.